I let my dad and stepmom live rent-free in my inherited house for years. Then they demanded my room for their upcoming baby and changed the lock to keep me out. So I called the police and had them evicted. When I was 15, my dad remarried. My stepmom Margaret tried way too hard to be my new mom. She constantly hovered around me, asking about my day, my friends, and my hobbies. She bought me clothes I never asked for and decorated my room without my permission. I later found out this was because she barely spoke to her own daughter from her previous marriage. My dad just stood by and watched this happen. He never stepped in when I told him I needed space. After 3 months of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I asked my grandfather, my dad's father, if I could move in with him. Grandpa Murphy had a big house with plenty of room, and he immediately said yes. He was a retired judge and had always been the most level-headed person in our family. My dad didn't fight it much. He seemed relieved that there wouldn't be tension in his new marriage. Living with Grandpa Murphy was great. He gave me space when I needed it, but was always available when I wanted to talk. He taught me about finances, property management, and law. These lessons turned out to be incredibly valuable later. When I was 17, Grandpa Murphy had a heart attack and passed away unexpectedly. In his will, he left me his entire estate, including the house we lived in, together 2 rental properties downtown, and a considerable amount of money. I was shocked. I had no idea he planned to leave everything to me. My dad was furious. He kept saying the property should have gone to him since he was Grandpa's son. But Grandpa's was ironclad. He had even recorded a video explaining his decisions. In it, he said he was leaving everything to me because he believed I would be responsible with it, unlike my father, who had borrowed and lost significant amounts of money from him over the years. Here's where things got weird. Instead of me moving back in with my dad and stepmom, they decided to move into the house I had inherited. They claimed their place was too small for the 3 of us, even though I had lived there before. And since I had this big house now, it made sense for them to move in. I was still 17, so I didn't have much say in the matter. I did, however, set 2 clear conditions. They were not to enter my bedroom or my grandfather's office. These rooms contained personal items and important paperwork. The house had 4 bedrooms total, so they still had plenty of space for themselves and a guest room. When I turned 18, I left for college in another state. I continued to let my dad and stepmom live in my house rent-free. I only came home during holidays and some weekends, which suited me fine. I paid all the property taxes and maintenance costs. I never asked them for a dime. I figured they were keeping an eye on the place for me. This arrangement worked for 6 years until last month when everything fell apart. I received a call from my dad while I was at work. He told me I needed to clean out my bedroom because they were turning it into a nursery. I was confused and asked why they needed a nursery. He explained that my stepmom had reconnected with her estranged daughter Lisa, who was pregnant and homeless. They had invited Lisa to move into my house. I reminded him that they were guests in my house and did not have the authority to make these decisions. He argued that my room was the only one suitable for a nursery because the guest room was too small. I pointed out that they could have asked me before inviting someone else to live there, especially since Lisa could have used the guest room until they figured out something else. My dad raised his voice and said I was being selfish. I needed to understand that family helps family. I reminded him that Lisa wasn't even my family. I had never met her. I then firmly told him not to touch my room or my grandfather's office or I would evict them. I suggested they move back to their old house if they needed more space. My dad got quiet for a moment before saying they had sold their house years ago. That evening, my Uncle Jack, my dad's brother, called me. Uncle Jack and my dad hadn't spoken in years due to some business disagreement, so I was surprised to hear from him. He said my dad had called him complaining about my threat to evict them. Uncle Jack suggested I reconsider and not kick my father out. I told him I would think about it, but I had already made up my mind. The next day, I called my lawyer, Donna. She had been Grandpa Murphy's lawyer and had helped me manage the property since I inherited them. I asked her to accompany me to the house to formally give my dad and stepmom notice to vacate. Donna agreed and suggested we go early in the morning to avoid a scene. We arrived at the house at 7 a.m. the following day. I tried to unlock the door, but my key didn't work. My dad had changed the locks. I knocked loudly until my dad answered. He spoke through the closed door, saying he wouldn't let me in until I changed my mind about the nursery. I told him I had come with my lawyer to handle this properly, but if he wouldn't let me in, I would handle it my way. He still refused. Donna and I went straight to the police station. While we were driving there, Uncle Jack called again. This time his tone was different. He said my dad had called him again, asking him to convince me to back down. Uncle Jack told me he was tired of my dad's manipulative behavior and would support whatever decision I made. At the police station, Donna explained the situation. Since I had all the documentation proving I owned the house, the police agreed to accompany us back. When we arrived, the officers informed my dad that he had to allow me entry and that they were being evicted for changing the locks without permission and refusing the property owner access. My dad tried to argue. He claimed he had nowhere to go. He said they had lived there for years and had rights. He even tried to say that Grandpa Murphy had promised him the house verbally. The officers asked if he had any documentation to support his claims. He didn't. The officers explained that as the legal owner, I had the right to evict them, especially since there was no formal lease agreement. I hired a moving truck to help them move out. They only had their bedroom furniture and personal items to take, as most of the house contents belonged to either me or Grandpa Murphy. My stepmom cried the entire time while my dad kept telling the officers this was all a misunderstanding. Lisa stood in the background looking uncomfortable. I noticed she was barely showing her pregnancy. After they left, I immediately called a locksmith to change the locks again. I also installed security cameras around the property. I thought this would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A month later, I was out of town for work. My girlfriend Ellie was staying at the house. My dad showed up unannounced. He told Ellie that since we were living comfortably in the house, we should host him, Margaret, and Lisa for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. He gave her a list of foods he expected us to prepare and presents they wanted. Ellie told him to leave immediately or she would call the police. He left, but not before telling her I was an ungrateful daughter who would regret treating him this way. I thought that would be the end of it, but 2 weeks later, my dad called my mom. They hadn't spoken since their divorce 16 years ago. He invited her to spend the holidays with the family at my house. My mom declined and instead offered to take me and Ellie on a trip to Italy for the holidays. When my dad found out about this, he called me demanding that my mom pay for him, Margaret, and Lisa to go to Italy too. When I refused, he came to my house again, insisting that either my mom include them or Ellie and I should pay for their trip. His behavior was so ridiculous that Ellie and I laughed until he left. I've changed my phone number since then. I've also given my tenants in my other properties a photo of my dad and instructions not to let him in under any circumstances. I hope this is finally the end of his entitlement, but knowing my dad, I doubt it. Update 1. After my last post, things were quiet for a while. My dad didn't try to contact me again, and I was starting to think maybe he had finally gotten the message. Ellie and I went ahead with our plans to spend the holidays in Italy with my mom. Before we left, I asked 2 friends who lived nearby to check on the house periodically. They reported no signs of my dad or any disturbances. Italy was amazing. My mom pulled out all the stops. We had a private tour of the Vatican, ate at incredible restaurants, and stayed in beautiful hotels. Ellie and I even discussed possibly moving to Europe someday. It was the most relaxed I had felt in months. Then, on December 28th, while we were having breakfast at our hotel in Rome, I received a call from Uncle Jack. He sounded frantic. He told me he was moving out of state immediately and needed to sell his house as quickly as possible. He didn't explain why he was in such a rush, but asked if I was interested in buying it. What Uncle Jack didn't know was that his house held special significance to our family. It was actually my great-grandparents' home where Grandpa Murphy grew up. Grandpa had given it to Uncle Jack years ago, but later told me he regretted the decision before he died. Grandpa asked me to try to get the house back someday, and if I succeeded, to give it to my cousin Maria. Maria is Uncle Jack's daughter from his first marriage. Uncle Jack never acknowledged her as his child and refused to pay child support. Maria lived with her mother in another country and struggled financially her whole life. Grandpa Murphy had stayed in touch with Maria and helped her when he could. He wanted her to have the family home as a way of making up for how Uncle Jack had treated her. Uncle Jack had no idea I knew about Maria or that I was in contact with her. If he had known, he probably wouldn't have offered to sell me the house. I decided to use his desperation to my advantage. I offered him 40% of the house's market value payable in 3 installments. He declined, saying the offer was too low and that he wouldn't be coming back to town again. I countered with a better offer, the same low amount, but paid in full immediately when I returned from Italy on January 3rd. I also offered to cover all the legal fees and his moving expenses. All he had to do was have his things packed and the paperwork ready when I got back. To my surprise, he accepted immediately. Ellie and I cut our trip short by 2 days and flew back. The transaction went smoothly. I paid Uncle Jack. He signed over the house, and he left town the same day. The next morning, I called Maria and told her to come to the U.S. as soon as possible because there was something important Grandpa Murphy had left for her. She arrived 3 days later and I gave her the keys to the house along with some money to help her get settled. Maria needed to stay for several days to handle the paperwork for the property transfer and to apply for a visa that would allow her to move permanently. During this time, she stayed with Ellie and me. We were having dinner at home one evening when my dad showed up again. As it turned out, Uncle Jack had been planning to sell the house to my dad. My dad had asked for a few days to gather the money and was furious when he learned I had bought it instead. Uncle Jack, wanting to avoid a confrontation with my dad, simply told him I had purchased the property and left town. My dad assumed I had bought the house for myself and decided to claim it. When no one answered his knocking at Uncle Jack's old house, he broke a window and let himself in. What he didn't know was that the house had a doorbell camera that Maria had just installed. We watched the break-in on Maria's phone and called the police immediately. Since Maria was a foreign national and the break-in was happening in an upscale neighborhood, the police responded quickly. They arrived at the house and found my dad inside going through closets and drawers. He was shocked when the police told him the house belonged to Maria, not me. They arrested him for breaking and entering. With help from my lawyer, Maria pressed charges against my dad. Due to his previous behavior at my house, changing locks and refusing entry to the legal owner, the judge denied bail. He's currently in jail awaiting trial and could face several months of jail time. After my dad was arrested, I did some digging to find out why Uncle Jack had been in such a hurry to leave town. It turns out he had borrowed a significant amount of money from his wife's brother for a business venture that failed spectacularly. When he couldn't repay the loan, his brother-in-law threatened legal action. Uncle Jack decided to sell everything and skip town rather than face the consequences. I sent Uncle Jack a text message letting him know that if he ever tried to contact my dad or cause problems for Maria, I would tell his wife's family where he was. He responded by blocking my number, which was fine by me. I don't expect we'll hear from him again. Maria is considering keeping the house and moving to the US permanently. She works in IT and can do her job remotely from anywhere. Having the house gives her a fresh start away from her difficult childhood and the opportunity to build a new life. Update 2. My dad's trial was last week. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail for breaking and entering plus an additional 3 months for the incident at my house, changing the locks and refusing entry. The judge was particularly harsh because my dad showed no remorse during the proceedings. He maintained that as my father, he had every right to enter property that should have been his in the first place. My stepmom, Margaret, approached me outside the courthouse after the sentencing. This was the first time we had spoken since the eviction. She looked terrible. She had lost weight, and her clothes were wrinkled and stained. She told me Lisa had moved out a few weeks after they were evicted. Apparently, Lisa wasn't actually pregnant. She had lied about it to get sympathy and a place to stay. Margaret and my dad had been living in a motel since the eviction, and their savings were almost gone. Margaret asked if I would consider letting them move back into one of my houses once my dad was released from jail. She promised they would pay rent and respect my boundaries. I told her I had tenants in all my properties now and there were no vacancies. This wasn't entirely true. I did have one rental unit sitting empty, but I had no intention of letting them live in it. Margaret started crying and asked if I could at least give them some money to help them get back on their feet. I walked away without responding. The next day, I received multiple calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. My dad had somehow managed to call them from jail and told them I had left him and Margaret homeless out of spite. Most of these relatives didn't know the full story and were quick to judge me. I blocked their numbers one by one. One call I did take was from my grandmother, my mom's mother. She had received a letter from my dad asking for money. The letter claimed I had stolen his inheritance and left him destitute. My grandmother wanted to know my side of the story. I explained everything that had happened, including the fact that my dad and Margaret had lived rent-free in my house for 6 years. My grandmother was supportive and assured me I had done nothing wrong. Maria moved into Uncle Jack's old house last month. She's adjusting well to life in the US and has already made some friends in the neighborhood. She invited Ellie and me over for dinner to thank us for helping her. During the evening, she showed us some old family photos and documents she had found in the attic. Among them was a letter from Grandpa Murphy to Uncle Jack written just a few months before Grandpa died. In the letter, Grandpa expressed his disappointment in both his sons and explained why he planned to leave his estate to me instead. He mentioned that my dad had borrowed over $100,000 from him over the years and never repaid a cent. He also wrote that Uncle Jack had stolen money from Grandpa's business when he worked there briefly in his 20s. The letter made it clear that Grandpa believed neither of his sons was financially responsible. Maria gave me the letter saying I should have it in case my dad tried to challenge Grandpa's will again in the future. I didn't tell her that I had found similar letters in Grandpa's office years ago. Grandpa had been very thorough in documenting his reasons for his estate planning decisions. Last week, Ellie and I went to look at the empty rental property I mentioned earlier. It's a small house that needs some renovations before I can rent it out again. While we were there, we discovered someone had been staying in the house without permission. There was a sleeping bag in one of the bedrooms along with some food wrappers and dirty clothes. The back door lock had been broken. I called the police who came and checked the property. They didn't find anyone there at the time, but took a report of the break-in. That night, they called to tell me they had caught someone trying to enter the house. It was Lisa, my stepmom's daughter. She admitted she had been staying there for several weeks after she ran out of money for a motel room. She had gotten the address from my dad before he went to jail. I decided not to press charges against Lisa on the condition that she leave town and never contact me or my family again. She agreed and left the next day on a bus to another state. I hired a security company to install better locks and an alarm system on all my rental properties. Update 3. My dad was released from jail last week. I knew this because Margaret called to inform me. She said my dad wanted to meet with me to clear the air and start over. I declined. She then mentioned they were still struggling financially and asked again if I could help them. I told her that 6 years of free housing was all the help they were going to get from me. 2 days after his release, my dad showed up at my workplace. I work at a marketing firm downtown. He walked right past reception and found me in the conference room during a client meeting. He created a scene talking loudly about how I had abandoned him in his time of need and turned the family against him. Security had to escort him out of the building. My boss was understanding, but suggested I work from home for a while in case my dad returned. That same day, I filed for a restraining order against my dad. Unlike in my original post where I mentioned restraining orders being useless in my country, they are taken seriously here. The judge granted the order based on my dad's behavior in his recent jail time. The order prevents him from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. Maria has fully settled into her new home. She found a good job at a local tech company and has made friends in the neighborhood. She invited me and Ellie over for a housewarming party last month. The house looks completely different. She's renovated it beautifully while keeping some of the original features that meant so much to Grandpa Murphy. Ellie moved in with me permanently, and we're discussing buying a house together in a different neighborhood. While I love my grandfather's house, it carries too many negative memories now. We're looking at properties closer to downtown where we both work. I plan to keep Grandpa's house as a rental property. It's in a desirable area and should generate good income. As for my other properties, they're all rented to reliable tenants now. I raise the rent slightly to cover the cost of the new security systems, but still keep it below market value. Several of my tenants are friends or colleagues who needed affordable housing, and I'm happy to help them out. Uncle Jack tried to contact Maria a few months ago. He claimed he wanted to reconnect with his daughter and make amends for the past. Maria didn't respond to his messages. She later found out through a mutual acquaintance that Uncle Jack was in financial trouble again and likely looking for a place to stay. Maria changed her phone number as a precaution. My mom suggested I speak with a financial advisor about setting up a trust for my properties. This would provide an extra layer of protection in case my dad ever tried to claim he had rights to any of them. I met with an advisor last week and am in the process of establishing the trust. Grandpa Murphy would have approved of this step. He always emphasized the importance of protecting assets. Margaret filed for divorce from my dad last month. She contacted me to let me know not to ask for anything. She apologized for her role in everything that happened and said she realized how toxic my dad could be. I didn't respond to her message. While I don't wish her ill, I don't want any connection to that part of my life anymore. The holidays are approaching again, and this year, Ellie and I are hosting Thanksgiving at our home. We've invited my mom, Maria, and a few close friends. It will be the first holiday in years that I'm actually looking forward to celebrating. There will be no drama, no unreasonable demands, and no unwelcome guests, just people who respect and care about each other. I started this journey as a 15-year-old seeking refuge with my grandfather. Now at 25, I've built a life that I'm proud of, surrounded by people I choose to have in it. I've learned that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about who shows up for you when it matters and who treats you with respect and kindness. Those are the people worth keeping in your life. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My controlling dad hired an actress to ruin my wedding and destroy my relationship. 6 months later, he walked me down the aisle. The twist, I invited him. I, 28 female, have been with my fiancé Simon, 31 male, for 4 years, and our relationship has been a roller coaster of emotions, especially in recent months. We were supposed to get married last week, but everything fell apart because of my controlling father Patrick, 55 male. To understand how we got here, I need to take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew everyone else's business. My childhood was relatively normal until I turned 10. That's when my parents' marriage imploded in a spectacular fashion. My mom, Tanya, 50 female, had been having an affair with her yoga instructor for months. When my dad found out, it was like a bomb went off in our family. The divorce was messy and drawn out. My mom, feeling guilty and wanting a fresh start, moved to California. I stayed with my dad in Ohio, more out of necessity than choice. He was a successful accountant and could provide stability, while my mom was starting over with nothing but her yoga mat and a suitcase full of regrets. After the divorce, my dad changed. The once easygoing man who used to take me fishing on weekends transformed into a strict, overprotective parent. He installed a security system that would ping his phone every time I entered or left the house. He vetted all my friends and insisted on chaperoning every school dance. At the time, I thought he was just being cautious, but looking back, I realized he was terrified of losing me like he lost my mom. I spent summers with my mom in California, but our relationship was strained. She was busy trying to build a new life, working 2 jobs and dating a series of men who seemed to get progressively younger. I felt like an afterthought in her new world, a reminder of the life she'd left behind. When I turned 18, I saw college as my ticket to freedom. I applied to schools as far from Ohio as possible and ended up at the University of Washington in Seattle. Those first few years were liberating. I made new friends, tried new things, and for the first time felt like I could breathe without my dad watching over my shoulder. I limited my calls home to once a week, giving my dad just enough information to keep him from worrying, but not enough for him to micromanage my life from afar. My mom and I exchanged occasional texts, usually on birthdays or holidays. I was determined to forge my own path free from the baggage of my parents' failed marriage. It was during my senior year that I met Simon. My roommate dragged me to a house party, insisting I needed to live a little before graduation. That's where I saw him, tall, with messy brown hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He was trying to explain the intricacies of bridge engineering to a group of clearly uninterested sorority girls. I rescued him from that conversation, and we ended up talking all night. He was 27, working as an engineer for a local firm. He was smart, funny, and refreshingly honest. We exchanged numbers, but I was hesitant to start anything serious. With graduation looming, we kept in touch over the next few months, meeting for coffee or the occasional movie. After I graduated and landed a job at a local marketing firm, our relationship naturally progressed. A year later, we moved in together. When I introduced Simon to my dad during a visit home, I was hopeful. My dad was polite, asking Simon about his job and his family. But I noticed the way my dad's eyes narrowed when Simon mentioned he'd been married briefly in his early 20s. It was a starter marriage that lasted all of 6 months, but I could see my dad filing that information away for future use. After that visit, my dad started calling more frequently. He'd casually ask about Simon, wondering if we were getting too serious. He'd remind me that I was still young and had plenty of time to settle down. I brushed off his concerns, chalking it up to his usual overprotectiveness. Fast forward to our engagement. Simon proposed on our 3-year anniversary during a hike to a beautiful waterfall. It was perfect, just us, nature, and a simple yet elegant ring. I was over the moon. When I called my dad to share the news, his reaction was like a bucket of ice water. He was silent for a long moment before launching into a tirade about how I was making a huge mistake. He brought up Simon's failed marriage, questioned his career stability, and even hinted that Simon might be after my non-existent fortune. I hung up feeling deflated and angry. As wedding planning got underway, my dad's behavior worsened. He'd call with concerns about every decision we made. The venue was too expensive. We were paying for it ourselves. The guest list was too large. It was actually quite small. The honeymoon destination was too dangerous. We were going to Canada, for crying out loud. A week before the wedding, my dad showed up unannounced at our apartment. He had a thick manila folder tucked under his arm and a grim expression that made my stomach drop. He insisted we all sit down for a family meeting. What followed was like a scene from a bad detective movie. My dad started pulling out evidence he'd gathered about Simon. There were blurry photos of Simon talking to women at bars, which turned out to be his cousins at a family reunion. He had printouts of old social media posts that he claimed showed Simon's true character. They were mostly bad jokes and memes from college. The final blow was a fake background check report that my dad had clearly fabricated himself. I was livid. I told my dad he was out of line and needed to leave. Simon, bless him, remained calm throughout the ordeal, even offering to address each of my dad's concerns point by point. We agreed to talk to my dad again in a few days, hoping he'd come to his senses once he realized how ridiculous he was being. The day before our wedding rehearsal, my dad called. He said he had irrefutable proof of Simon's misdeeds and insisted on meeting us at a cafe near our venue. Against my better judgment, and despite Simon's reservations, I agreed. I thought if we could just clear the air, we could salvage the relationship and move forward with the wedding. What happened next still feels like a bad dream. My dad showed up at the cafe with a woman I'd never seen before. He introduced her as Jennifer, 29 female, claiming she was Simon's secret girlfriend. Jennifer launched into a rehearsed-sounding story about her long-term relationship with Simon, complete with details about secret rendezvous and promises of a future together. I looked at Simon expecting to see anger or indignation. Instead, he looked completely baffled. He swore he had never seen this woman before in his life. The situation quickly devolved into a shouting match with my dad and Jennifer on one side, and Simon and me on the other. Just as I was about to storm out, Jennifer's facade cracked. She burst into tears and confessed that my dad had paid her to lie. She apologized profusely, saying she was an out-of-work actress who needed the money. She fled the cafe, leaving behind a stunned silence. The betrayal I felt in that moment was indescribable. My own father had gone to such extreme lengths to sabotage my happiness. Simon was furious, pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. He said he couldn't go through with the wedding if my dad was going to be there. I couldn't blame him. We ended up postponing the wedding indefinitely. I was heartbroken and humiliated. We had to call all our guests and explain that there was a family emergency. Some understood, others were clearly annoyed. I felt like I was letting everyone down. Now I'm at a crossroads. I love Simon with all my heart, and I know none of this is his fault, but he's understandably shaken and says he needs time to process everything. He's questioning whether he can be part of a family with such a manipulative father-in-law. My mom, who flew in for the wedding, is staying with us for now. She's furious with my dad and keeps apologizing for not being more present in my life. She thinks if she had been around more, she could have tempered my dad's controlling tendencies. I don't know what to do. Should I cut my dad out of my life completely? Try to salvage my relationship with Simon? Postpone the wedding for a longer period. I feel like my whole world has been turned upside down, and I'm not sure how to write it again. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. I'm lost and could use some perspective from people who aren't embroiled in this mess. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the wedding that wasn't, and I'm still reeling from the aftermath. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. Your support, advice, and even your harsh truths have been a lifeline during this chaotic time. These past 14 days have been a whirlwind of emotions, difficult conversations, and some surprising revelations. I've cried more than I thought possible, but I've also found strength I didn't know I had. Let me start with Simon. The day after the cafe disaster, we had a long, raw conversation that lasted well into the night. Simon didn't hold back. He was hurt not just by my dad's actions, but also because he felt I should have put a stop to my dad's behavior long before it reached this point. His words stung, but I knew he was right. I realized I had been making excuses for my dad's actions for years, always hoping he'd change, always believing that deep down, he had my best interests at heart. Simon helped me see that by allowing my dad's behavior to continue unchecked, I had been complicit in it. We decided to start couples counseling. We found a therapist who specializes in family trauma, and we've had 3 sessions so far. It's been challenging, but also enlightening. We're learning to communicate better, to express our fears and insecurities without attacking each other. Simon has been incredibly patient, and I'm grateful for his willingness to work through this with me. As for my dad, I finally gathered the courage to confront him. I asked to meet him at a neutral location, a park near my apartment. I didn't want him in our home, but I also didn't want to have this conversation over the phone. When I saw my dad, I was struck by how old he suddenly looked. His hair seemed grayer, his posture more stooped, but I steeled myself, remembering all the pain he had caused. I laid everything out, how his actions had hurt me, damaged my relationship, and betrayed my trust. I told him about the humiliation of canceling the wedding, the strain it had put on my relationship with Simon, and the trust issues it had brought to the surface. I expected him to be defensive, to justify his actions or try to shift blame. To my surprise, he broke down. He confessed that he had been struggling with depression and anxiety ever since my mom left. He said he became overly attached to me and couldn't bear the thought of losing me to someone else. He admitted that he had convinced himself that Simon was going to hurt me, and in his twisted logic, he thought he was protecting me. He showed me a letter from his doctor revealing that he had recently been diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, which explained some of his more extreme behaviors. While I empathized with his struggles, I made it clear that his behavior was unacceptable. Mental health issues might explain his actions, but they don't excuse them. I told him that if he wanted any chance of being in my life, he needed to get professional help and make amends to both me and Simon. My dad agreed to start therapy. He gave me permission to speak with his therapist so I could be sure he was actually attending sessions and working on his issues. It's a small step, but it's something. My mom has been an unexpected source of support through all this. She extended her stay and has been helping us deal with the aftermath of the canceled wedding. She's been making calls to vendors, trying to recoup some of our deposits, and helping us figure out what to do with all the wedding favors and decorations we had already purchased. More importantly, she's been a sounding board for me. We've had some long, honest conversations about her marriage to my dad, her affair, and the impact their divorce had on all of us. She's been encouraging me to set firm boundaries with my dad, something she admits she should have done years ago. Simon and I have decided to take a short trip together next month. Nothing extravagant, just a weekend getaway to a nearby beach town. We both feel we need some time away from everything to reconnect and refocus on our relationship. We're still planning to get married, but we're taking things slow. We've agreed to revisit the idea in 6 months, giving us time to work through our issues in therapy and make sure we're both ready. As for the practical aspects of canceling a wedding, it's been a nightmare. We lost deposits on the venue and the catering. Most vendors have been understanding, but a few have been less than sympathetic. We're considering having a small dinner party for our local friends who were supposed to attend the wedding just as a way to thank them for their support and understanding. I'm focusing on healing my relationship with Simon and learning to stand up for myself. It's not easy. There are moments when I feel overwhelmed by guilt and uncertainty, but then I remind myself that I'm doing the work that I'm committed to change, and that's what matters. There's still a long road ahead, but for the first time in weeks, I'm feeling hopeful about the future. Thank you all again for your support. I'll update again when there's more to share. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some developments with you all. Your continued support and advice have been invaluable during this challenging time. Simon and I went on our weekend trip as planned. We chose a quiet beach town about 3 hours' drive from our home. The first day was awkward. We both felt the weight of everything we'd been through, and it was hard to relax. But as the weekend progressed, we found ourselves opening up more. We had some deep conversations about our future and what we both want. Simon confessed that he's always wanted children, but my dad's behavior had made him question whether bringing kids into this family dynamic was a good idea. I shared my own fears about parenthood, worried that I might inadvertently replicate some of my dad's controlling behaviors. These conversations weren't easy, but they brought us closer. We realized we both wanted the same things: a strong partnership, a family of our own, and the tools to break the cycle of dysfunction we'd both experienced in our families. When we returned home, we made a big decision. We're moving forward with our wedding plans, but on our own terms. We're planning a small, intimate ceremony with just our closest friends and immediate family. No big production, no stress, just us celebrating our love surrounded by the people who have supported us through this difficult time. We've set a date for 3 months from now. It feels soon, but also right. We don't want to wait any longer to start our life together, and we feel that this smaller ceremony better reflects who we are as a couple. My dad has been seeing a therapist regularly. He sends me weekly updates on his progress, which I appreciate, but he's also respecting my request for space. Last week, he sent a heartfelt letter apologizing to Simon. It wasn't perfect. There were still traces of his old thinking, but it was a start. Simon and I discussed it, and we've agreed to meet with my dad next month. It'll be the first time we've seen him in person since the incident at the cafe. We're both nervous, but we feel it's necessary for closure. Regardless of the outcome, we've asked our couple's therapist to be present for the meeting to help mediate if things get tense. My mom has become more involved in my life, which has been both wonderful and challenging. We're rebuilding our relationship, and I'm learning things about my parents' marriage that I never knew. She shared stories about my dad's controlling behavior during their marriage, which helps me understand, but not excuse some of his recent actions. She's also been open about her own mistakes, including the affair that led to their divorce. It's been eye-opening to see my parents as flawed, complex individuals, rather than the one-dimensional figures I'd cast them as in my mind. The woman my dad hired, Jennifer, reached out to apologize again. She explained that she was in a tough financial situation, behind on rent and facing eviction. When my dad approached her with his scheme, she provided copies of their text exchanges and the agreement they'd made. I've kept this information not because I plan to use it, but because it feels important to have a record of what happened. Simon and I are taking things day by day. We're stronger now, but we're still working through some trust issues. The couple's counseling has been a big help. We've learned techniques for communicating more effectively and for supporting each other through difficult moments. I'm learning to stand up for myself and set boundaries, not just with my dad, but in all areas of my life. It's not always easy. I still find myself slipping into old patterns sometimes, but I'm getting better at recognizing when I'm doing it and correcting course. Work has been a welcome distraction through all of this. I recently took on a big project at the marketing firm, leading a campaign for a new client. It's challenging, but it's also helping me rebuild my confidence. Simon has been incredibly supportive, listening to my ideas and offering encouragement when I doubt myself. We've also started talking about our future beyond the wedding. We're considering buying a house in the next year or two. It feels good to be making plans again, to be looking forward instead of always glancing over our shoulders. As we approach our rescheduled wedding date, I find myself feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness, but it's a different kind of nervousness than before. This time it's not about whether we're doing the right thing, but about starting this new chapter of our lives together. Thank you all for your continued support. I'll update again after our meeting with my dad, and as we get closer to the wedding. Update 3. It's been 6 months since this whole ordeal began, and I wanted to give a final update. So much has happened, and I'm in a very different place now than I was when I first posted. First, and most importantly, Simon and I got married last weekend. It was a beautiful, intimate ceremony in a small garden with just 30 of our closest friends and family. It was nothing like our original plans, but it was perfect for us. We wrote our own vows, and there wasn't a dry eye in the garden when we finished. The meeting we had with my dad a few months ago went better than expected. He's been consistently working with his therapist, and the change in him is noticeable. He's less anxious, more willing to listen, and he's learning to respect boundaries. During our meeting, he apologized to both Simon and me. He admitted that his actions were driven by his own fears and insecurities, not by any real concern about Simon's character. He also shared that he's been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and is on medication now, which has helped him manage his intrusive thoughts. After a lot of discussion and soul-searching, we decided to invite my dad to the wedding. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt right. He attended, and to his credit, he was on his best behavior. He even gave a short emotional speech at the reception, apologizing publicly for his actions and promising to do better. It was a powerful moment of healing for our family. Simon has been incredible throughout this whole process. He's shown me what true partnership looks like, supporting me while also maintaining his own boundaries. Our relationship is stronger than ever. We've learned to communicate more openly, to trust each other more deeply, and to face challenges as a team. My mom walked me down the aisle. Over these past months, we've rebuilt our relationship, and I'm grateful for her presence in my life now. She's become someone I can turn to for advice and support, something I never thought would be possible, given our strained relationship in the past. As for me, I've learned so much about setting boundaries and standing up for myself. I'm in therapy on my own now, working through some of the issues that stemmed from my childhood. It's not always easy, but I'm in a much better place emotionally and mentally. We're settling into married life now, and it feels wonderful. We're planning a belated honeymoon for next summer, a trip to New Zealand that we're both excited about. We've also started looking at houses in a nearby neighborhood, thinking about putting down roots. This whole experience, as difficult as it was, taught me valuable lessons about family love and self-respect. While I wouldn't wish it on anyone, I'm grateful for the growth it's brought. I've learned that it's possible to love someone while still holding them accountable for their actions. I've learned that it's okay to prioritize my own well-being and that of my relationship. And I've learned that with work and commitment, it's possible to break dysfunctional family patterns. I want to thank everyone who's followed this story and offered support and advice along the way. Your words helped more than you know, giving me strength when I felt lost and offering perspective when I couldn't see clearly. For anyone going through something similar, I want you to know that it does get better. It takes work, and it's not always easy, but it's possible to come out the other side stronger and happier.